Hi there again, it's Rich with another one of my videos, and today I'm really excited to have the chance to do a review of a favourite of mine from the 90s, the Mk3 Golf VR6 with the 2.8 litre engine. This car was really, I feel, saved the Mk3 Golf. The Golf had such strong heritage during the 70s and 80s with the Mark 1 and Mark 2 GTIs, and then in the 90s the Mark 3 it all grew a bit sensible. It grew in weight and size, and the GTI was just a little bit of a letdown really. But then Volkswagen decided to put the 2.8 VR6 engine in to the Mark 3, and it really spawned this car, which certainly in the 90s for me was a car that I really wanted, and producing about 175-176 brake horsepower. And the styling of the VR6, and what made it such a great looking car, was that it was so subtle. You've got the VR6 badge there on the front grille, which actually is a very subtle way of saying what engine lies beneath that bonnet. You've got the great triple lights that blow down below the headlights, and then down the side of the car, this one runs non-standard wheels. These are 17-inch, I think they're TT alloys, but really set it off on Yokohama tyres, and it's just really subtle styling with that huge great C-pillar there at the back, and a very subtle spoiler on the rear window. And then some of the Golfs had the subtle VR6 on the badge. This has had it removed, and then with again another, it is aftermarket, most will be aftermarket, the twin exhausts of the VR6. And the great thing with the Mk3 Golf, obviously when it came in as a 5-door hatch, you've got great versatility, so you can comfortably sit 4 adults here in this car, and with the added space of having quite a large sized boot. One thing I have noticed on this car is these here, this recess, and actually if anybody knows what this is for here, and I'm not actually sure what it is, it's on both sides, please leave a comment, because yeah, on all my cars I've never seen that sort of recess. So anyone's got any idea, please drop me a comment. This is very typical of the sort of very functional mid-90s German car. Very simple, straightforward. This has got a Momo aftermarket steering wheel. The twin dash there with a probably slightly optimistic 160 mph on the speedo. And then in truth, as you look around this car, it really could be any other Mk3 Golf. It's a little bit black, a little bit drab, but that's what they were like in the 90s. And this, the only real sign there is some wear on the bolster of the driver's seat, but as I say, it's done 100,000 miles and it's 23 years old, so you're going to expect a little bit of wear. But for me, what really excites me about this car is because it's one of the rare manual cars, and they're just so much more difficult to find. Well, here we go. Mk3 Golf VR6. I have to say, these seats, they are incredibly comfortable seats, and you sit in this car and straight away I've got a really great driving position. I feel actually quite low. I feel in the pedals seem to be in the right place, the gear stick is in the right place. It all feels actually really welcoming, and it is a little bit black, it is a little bit dull, it is a little bit plasticky, but this is 90s, and in the 90s I have to compare this to something like my Subaru Impreza Turbo that I had, and that had a little bit more horsepower, 20-30 brake horsepower more, but actually it was probably, the interior was probably less elegant than this, and actually I think everything, it just feels quite intuitive. The lights are there, the radio, the temperature controls, the fans, okay, the handbrake, the steering wheel, it all feels really in a great position. So let's take this for a quick drive and let's see what it sounds like. Wow. Now this has got an aftermarket exhaust, so it's a little bit more raspy, but it's trying to bring that vocal VR6 out more, and that sounds really good. So let's take this for a drive, and I'm really looking forward to this a lot. Yeah, this VR6, it really is, it dominates the noise in the cabin, probably due to the aftermarket exhaust. It gives it a real raspy sound and probably a little bit noisy at times, but it gives it a real brilliant pull. Surprisingly torquey, low down as well, but also when you get into them raspy high revs, it just comes on, it just comes alive, it comes on fire. The steering is also much better than I expected. I expected it to be a little bit dull, a little bit heavy, similar to sort of disappointment I think with the TT, but it feels a little bit more agile. It feels a little bit more sure-footed, and yeah, I think the steering's much better than I could have imagined. And I do have to say, although the seats and the inside of the cabin looks a little bit dull and a little bit boring, actually the seats feel really comfortable, and these lumbar supports are actually very comfortable to sit in. And as for the noise of the VR6, an absolute monster of an engine, absolutely fantastic. If somebody told me this car was 10 years old and had done 50,000 miles, I'd actually believe them. It feels really fresh, it feels alive, it feels on its toes, and I have to say, it feels much better than my Mark 1 TT. And that's a real surprise for me. And the good thing about cars like the VR6 is that it really is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You can have this car and you could take your wife and your two children and you could go out for the day in this car and you could drive it like any other Golf. But then when you just wanted that quick blast down that B road, it can turn into this sort of snarling, fast, angered sports car. And that's a difficult thing to do. And I have to say, this VR6 could be the perfect car for it. So what do I think about the Mark 3 VR6? Well, it surprised me in a lot of ways. It's much more refined than I thought. The seats are really comfy, it rides really well, and that noise from the VR6 is sublime. But the biggest surprise is the handling. It actually feels really well put together. There's some feel there. I can feel the grip, I can feel the adhesion, I can feel the traction. It's okay under braking as well, and actually, all in all, it's a better driving experience than my Mark 1 TT. And that's a surprise for me. The biggest issue with cars of this age, though, as always, is rust. And this has got signs of rust in the arches, and it's just things that you're going to have to treat if you want to keep these. But I look at where our 32 values are, and I think at the moment, Mark 3 VR6s with these 2.8 engines don't feel that you've been shortchanged here because you've got a lower BHP. Because actually, I think it better suits the Mark 3 Golf. I've been really impressed with this car, more so than I ever thought. Cars are going the opposite way now. Engines are getting smaller, they're becoming turbocharged, all to do with CO2 emissions. And that makes cars like the VR6 that bit more special. Large capacity, large CC, in a family hatchback. You just won't get that anymore. And if this car hadn't come along, the R32 Golfs wouldn't have come along. People generally, when they look at this engine, think of the Corrado VR6. And what a great car that was. But there's something about the subtle styling of the Mk3 Golf VR6 that just looks plain Jane to everybody else. And it defies what lies beneath that bonnet. And that for me is absolutely fantastic. That's what I love about this car. And it drives brilliantly, it goes really well, it sounds great, and you can do all that inside legal speed limits. And that for me is where some of our modern cars, they're getting faster and more powerful. It's just too difficult to do it safely on the road. This is why cars like this, I think, are going to be cherished and are going to be loved, and I think are just going to appreciate in value. And especially when you've got a gear change like this, it's such a disappointment that so many are actually autos. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and it's been a real surprise for me how good, especially on the handling of the steering. I had expectations of similarities to my Mark 1 TT, and you know what, it's proven to me that this Mk3 Golf was actually better, even though it's a much older car. Hats off to the Golf VR6. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. If you have, give me the thumbs up, please subscribe and keep watching, because there's a video coming up very soon. Thanks again.